Hello everyone, patching into the second autumn 2020 update from Gaz Weather. So we did one update for the autumn a couple of weeks ago, and then last week the autumn updates went on the back burner as we released the gazweathers.com winter 2020-21 NAO forecast. And now we're back though, we're back in business with the autumn updates, and yes, autumn update number 2 is going to be with you, or it is with you right now, so we will go through it very shortly. Just to say that coming up later on today, we're going to have Gaz Weather's Sunny Roundup, so as always on a Sunday lunchtime, early afternoon, we've got your eclectic mix of this and that. We've also got the ECMWF, Meteo France and DWD long range update coming up for you around 3ish this afternoon. And then from 5 o'clock, we're going to be live stream. We've got our live stream where within that, we'll show the Beijing Climate Centre long-range seasonal model for the winter of 2020-21. So that's going to be a very, very interesting live stream. That'll be coming up on YouTube and across Gaz Weather's platforms through this afternoon from 5 o'clock. Okay then, so back to the autumn update. So, of course, we're going to do regular updates from now on for the autumn of 2020. At the end of August, I haven't got the date yet, but at the end of August, we'll release the gazweathers.com autumn 2020 forecast. All of these updates are building up a picture for the autumn forecast. We're also going to have a seasonal model roundup coming up on Saturday. First season model roundup for the autumn 2020 will be with you on Saturday, and there's going to be more season model roundups come at the end of July, also at the end of August too. So I'll get off it for you shortly. It's going to be quite a long video, so if you can't watch it all in go, then the video will be placed on the autumn updates page. There'll be a written summary that goes with that as well. So you'll be able to have a read about watch video on demand whenever you want. And that'll be from later on. We're probably quite late, so we've got the live stream to do from 5 o'clock. So it will be a little bit later on. This evening. Big thank you to my good friend Richard Traw for the autumn updates gift. I think this is one of the greatest works that Richard has done. So big thank you to you, Richard, for the autumn updates gift. I love the colours on this one, those reds and golds. I think that looks absolutely fantastic. So thank you, Richard, for that. Also, we've had some help with this from Terry Scully and also from James Ackrill as well. So it's a joint effort. We're very much a collaboration. We're like a 4-piece ensemble, really a lot of the time. So a big thanks to Richard, to Terry, and to James. Right, that's it then. So we're going to be looking at spring to autumn data for this one. So we're going to deal with CT first of all, and then we will have a look at England and Wales precipitation. That'll be in the second part of the video. But essentially the temperature for this spring comes out at 9.86. It's a very warm spring. We get to that by March, having a CT of 6.7, April having a CT of 10.4, and May having a CT of 12.5, and that gets us to an overall spring CT temperature of 9.86. As I say, it was a very warm spring, and so essentially we're going to look at autumns following springs with a CT range of 9.5 to 10.3. 10.3, by the way, is like the warmest spring on record, and when we get to it I'll tell you what it is, but the range is 9.5 to 10.3. Places spring 2020 nicely in the middle of that range, and yes, so basically we're looking at autumns following the warmest springs on record for the CT. So our first one is going to be the autumn of 1868. So this one has some northern blocking with higher pressure up to the north in the northern latitudes, and lower pressure is down to our south, and it leaves us bringing in the winds from like an east to northeast direction. So quite a cool spring, quite a cool autumn, I should say, after what was a very hot summer. The summer of 1868 was a very hot summer. We go into something rather cooler for the autumn of 1868. Next up, we have the autumn of 1893. Again, following this spring CT range of 9.5 to 10.3. This was a very unsettled autumn with a lot of low pressure across much of northern Western Europe, a ridge of above average heights out in the middle of the Atlantic. This is quite a cool to cold and wet autumn in 1893. Our next one, there's a very long gap then. Our next autumn is 1943. So the next time we have an autumn following a CT range of 9.5 to 10.3 is in 1943. This autumn is kind of unsettled, really. Below average heights extending down through the west of Europe, above average heights out to west and also to the east. I think it's a relatively mild autumn, but it is quite an unsettled autumn too. Our next autumn is 1945. This one is a very anticyclonic autumn, with above average heights generally centering more or less over the top of the country, winds in from the east. That's quite a warm and dry autumn in 1945. The next autumn, again following a spring CT range of 9.5 to 10.3, is the autumn of 1948. And with this one, we have above average heights over to the south of the country. We have below average heights up to our north. It leans on the warm side of a jet stream, doing something like that with a flow with a jet stream. Quite an anticyclonic autumn, and a very mild autumn too, with winds wafting up from the southwest. Then we have the autumn of 1957, and this also is a little bit anticyclonic, with above average heights over ever so slight to west of the country, below average heights up to the north. Jet stream is going northwards as well. So again, that's a relatively anticyclonic and pretty mild autumn, I think, for 1957. I think it does have quite a wettish sort of September though. Then 1959, and we talked about this one quite a bit over the last, because it did feature quite regularly within the summer updates as well. So 1959 is a very extended summer. It begins in the spring, it's still going on into the autumn. So around 6 months really of extended summer in 1959, from around March, April, right way through to October. And this one you see we have a high pressure over Scandinavia. We bring in the winds from the east, lots of dry and warm weather through September and October of 1959. It does finally break in November of 1959, and it turns quite a lot wetter then. Then another really long gap to 1990. So the next time we have an autumn following a spring with a CT range of 9.5 to 10.3 is in 1990. This one with above average heights to the northwest, north of the country, west northwest, below average heights to our east, southeast of the country. We bring in the winds from like a northeasterly type direction. It's a coolish sort of autumn, especially late on. So it does have quite a warm October though, and then as we get into November, it does start to get a little bit cold. And we know that the winter of 1990-91 was quite a cold winter late on. The first hints of that perhaps begin to appear around November of 1990. Overall though, I think it probably still comes out a little bit milder than average, because it does have a very mild October. Right, let's carry on. And our next autumn, following a spring CT range of 9.5 to 10.3, is going to be the autumn of 1992. This one is quite cold, quite a cold autumn, especially in October. November 1992 is mild and very wet, but October 1992 has a lot of cold northerly winds. And yeah, it's quite a chilly autumn anyway in 1992, and eventually very wet. Then we have the autumn of 1997. This one is quite a dry anticyclonic autumn, or at least for September and October anyway. By the time you get into November, it does start to turn much, much wetter then. But September and October 1997 are relatively dry and relatively anticyclonic. 1998 shows up next, again following this following this spring CT range, should say, of 9.5 10.3. This one is a cooler and more unsettled autumn. Below average heights over to the east of the country, winds are like in from a northerly direction. So with this one, it has quite a warm, wet September. October at 1998 is very wet. November, not nearly as wet, but it is rather cooler. 1999 is a mild, dry, anticyclonic sort of autumn with some similarity to 1959 probably. above average heights sitting to the east-northeast and bringing up these warm southeasterly winds. So with that one, again, it's quite a dryish autumn, and it is also a very mild autumn. Has a really big heat wave through the first half of September 1999. I remember it well. Then we've got 2003. The autumn of 2003 looks like this, with above average heights generally covering much of the northern hemisphere. Actually, it's rather a strange autumn. For us, it's quite a mild autumn, quite a warm autumn, relatively dry. It does have a colder October, but September is a warm month, and November 2003 is mild. And generally, it's quite a dryish autumn as well. 2007 comes up next. So again, this is an autumn following a spring CT range of 9.5 to 10.3. This is an anticyclonic autumn, and of course the high pressure follows the deluge summer. So after the deluge summer of 2007, we go into a much drier autumn, and what a relief it was to do that as well. Overall, a mild and dry autumn 2007. 2009 shows up next. This is quite an interesting one because, of course, this precedes the very cold winter of 09-10. And with this one, there's no real sign actually of that very cold winter of 09-10, except perhaps up here. It does have a bit of northern blocking right way up in the Arctic and extending down into the west of Russia. But for us, actually, it's quite a mild autumn with sort of above average heights generally to the south of the country, below average heights to the west, winds in from the southwest. I remember with this one, there's a proper old drought through September into October of 2009. It's really dry. And then November 2009 sees the Atlantic come in big time. We have a very wet but also very mild November in 2009 with a lot of floods. And then we've got 2011, and this is one of the warmest autumns on record, with above average heights again sitting to our south and east. Below average heights are out to our north and west. Winds are being dragged up from a very mild southwesterly type direction. So that's a relatively dry autumn again in 2011, but also really warm too. Then we've got 2014, and this is another very warm autumn with below average heights out to our west, above average heights tending to be to our east, bringing up those winds from the south. That's another really warm and generally pretty dry autumn. I remember that has an exceptionally hot, I do say hot, Halloween. And then lastly, we've got 2017, and this spring is the warmest on CT record with a CT of 10.3. The autumn of 2017, following that warmest spring on record, is actually rather coolish. It's a rather coolish sort of autumn with above average heights out to the west, some below average heights to our east. Winds are doing something a bit like that. I think we get the remains of Hurricane Ophelia during this autumn, and it turns the skies red. Just for my birthday, around 16th of October, was it? 15th, 16th of October, just before my birthday on the 17th. But that was very warm. It's very warm during that day as well, as we brought up the remains of Ophelia and turned the sky to a Martian red. But otherwise, actually, it is quite a coolish autumn in 2007. Has quite a cool, wet 2017, I should say. Has quite a cool and wet September, and November does have a few little early tastes of northerly snap. So that's one of our cooler autumns in recent years, despite having a very warm day or so in October. Okay, let's see how that all comes together then. So, all Septembers combined following springs with a CT range of 9.5 to 10.3 looks like this. Generally has above average heights over and to the west, to the south of the country, below average heights up to the north. Winds tend to be coming in from the north-west to north-west. So it's a relatively anticyclonic signal. Probably not overall that warm, though, because I think we're tending to be bringing in the wind from a west or slightly northwesterly direction. So it's not an overly warm it's not an overly warm September that's signalled there, but quite anticyclonic. All Octobers combined also tend to have above average heights just out to our west. So again, we're doing something like that flowing with jet stream. Quite anticyclonic, plenty of dry weather. Could be a bit on the cool side, I suppose. All Novembers combined look a little bit more interesting as the high pressure tends to relocate towards Scandinavia. Possibly hints at bringing in some easterly winds there. So out of the three, I think November's the one that possibly holds the best prospect for something colder. The main takeaway from this, though, is very anticyclonic. A very anticyclonic and dry autumn is possible. And we see this with the all autumns combined chart. So when we have all autumns combined following a spring with a CT range of 9.5, 10.3, it is an anticyclonic signal with high pressure tending to be centred right over top of the country. So a dry and probably quite warmish spring is favoured overall. If we narrow things down to just the years post 1950, what does that do for us? So this is all autumns combined, following springs with a CT range of 9.5 to 10.3 from 1950 onwards. Still anticyclonic, high pressure tending to be dominating, and perhaps in a slightly more conducive position to start bringing up some warmer air as well. So possibly it's a slightly warmer signal for September. But on both analog batches, September is an anticyclonic signal. All Octobers combined post 1950, again above average heights tending to be across the UK, much of Northern Europe. So again, it's a dry signal, probably quite mild, warm as well. All Novembers combined post 1950. Again, we still have the Scandinavian high, but it's further away from us with lower pressure out to the west and to the southwest. So this is a slightly more unsettled signal and probably mild as well, as winds will be coming up from a southerly direction. So a mild, but also a little bit more unsettled signal for all Novembers combined post 1950. And then finally, this is how all autumns combined are coming out following springs from CT range of 9.5, 10.3 post 1950. And it's an anticyclonic autumn overall. A lot of dry and mild weather would be expected. Interestingly, it does favour heights to be relatively high within the northern latitudes. Could that be something for the winter to come? Who knows? Right, so that's it then for the first batch of autumn 2020 analogues for this second autumn 2020 analogues update. I'm going to pause the video there and I'll see you back very shortly, and we'll go through England and Wales rainfall data for spring to autumn. But you get yourself a little drink, get yourself a few nibbles, maybe some biscuits or whatever you like to nibble when we're doing the long range stuff. I can't have biscuits because I'm on a diet. And I've nearly lost 2 stone, can you believe? So I think I'm doing quite well with that diet, actually. So for me, it'll just be a glass of water. But for you, get yourself some nibbles and I'll see you back very soon. Okay, we're back, and we're ready to resume the second autumn 2020 update. So I hope you enjoyed the video so far. If you have, then please give us a like on video, give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the Gas Service YouTube channel. We're trying to get the subs up to 7k before the end of the summer. Little target I've set myself. I should have known better than start setting targets, but that's what we're trying to do. So make sure you're subbed to the YouTube channel, and let us know in the comments what you think if you have enjoyed this autumn 2020 update. So in the first part of the video, we was looking at central temperature, so autumns following springs with a specific CT range. Now we're going to look at England and Wales precipitation for the spring of 2020. So let's do it. So this is the England and Wales precipitation list for seasons from Hadley. This index goes all the way back to 1766. There it is. The first season, in fact, is for the spring of 1766, which had quite a wet spring at 217.2 millimetres. So let's scroll down and have a look at 2020. So we go down through years and decades. This is 2020 just here. So of course had a very wet winter for 2019-2020 that had 373.4 millimeters. Much drier spring. Look at this. The spring of 2020 for England and Wales precipitation has 105.2 millimeters. So very dry spring for 2020. And this means that for our next batch of analogues, we're going to be looking at autumns following springs with a CET range of 85 to 125 millimeters, and that places 2020 right in the middle. Okay then, so the first year is going to be 1837. The autumn of 1837 follows a spring England and Wales precipitation of 85 to 125 millimeters. This one with below average heights to our east, above average heights out to our west. This is a cooler and more unsettled autumn with unsettled weather, particularly for more eastern parts of the country. The next autumn is going to be 1840. This one is cold and also unsettled. Very intense northern blocking up towards Greenland with deep low pressure across many western parts of Europe. Leaves us bringing in those winds from an east to northeasterly direction. A cold, wet and potentially wintry autumn in 1840. Our next autumn, following an England and Wales spring precipitation of 85 to 125 millimeters, going to be autumn of 1844. This one again looks quite unsettled. Below average heights to our south, above average heights to our north. Winds tend to be in from the east. That could also be quite a cold and unsettled spring, particularly so for southern parts of the country. Next we have 1852. It's very funny how we get very dry springs in the 1800s, several of them. This one, again, for the autumn of 1852, has strong northern blocking signals around Greenland, intense high pressure up towards Greenland, a lot of low pressure across northern and western parts of the country. You know, envisage this could be a very cold autumn with winds in from the northeast, cold and wintry for the autumn of 1852. 1854 shows up next with low pressure to the east, high pressure out to west. This one could also be quite a cold autumn, perhaps a little bit less so because the northern blocking signals are not as strong. But nevertheless, it could be a rather cool and unsettled autumn overall. 1863 is showing up next. Loads of these very dry springs in the 1800s. Really strange, isn't it? This one is really unsettled. Low pressure centered over top of the country. Jet stream doing something like that. Probably a milder autumn, more Atlantic driven, but very, very wet for that autumn. Then we've got 1870, and again another unsettled autumn. So you can see that with this, the analogues package is quite clearly so far much more unsettled than for the CT data. But we started off with in the first part of the video. This is a wet autumn, winds in from the west, and probably mild westerly winds, yes, but it is very unsettled and wet autumn indeed. 1875 showing up next. Again, low pressure to our south, strong blocking up to our north. Winds are in from the east. That's another cold and wet autumn in 1875 with wintry potential. 1893 shows up next. Of course, we have this one in the first package of analogue. So this one with high pressure out to our west, low pressure to our east and southeast. Is quite a cool but also unsettled autumn in 1893 after what was quite a hot summer actually. Then we've got the autumn of 1900, this one with low pressure to our north, high pressure to our west, winds in from a westerly direction. I think that's just very typical sort of autumn. I don't think anything overly dramatic happens with that one. A long gap then through to 1929, and this is a very wet autumn. Also mild, winds in from the west, so it's Atlantic driven, mild and wet for the autumn of 1929. We have autumn 1938 turning up next, with low pressure to our north, high pressure is to our west, winds are in from a westerly direction. That one is again Atlantic driven and quite mild, has an exceptionally mild November in 1938, when it gets much colder in December. Then we have the autumn of 1944, and this one with low pressure to our east, or over to our east, high pressure to our west. This is quite a cool but also wet autumn in 1944. 1956 is a dry and anticyclonic autumn following a deluge summer. So the summer of 1956 was an exceptionally cold and wet summer, and then it all gets much better for the autumn, turns drier and also milder. The autumn of 1974 showing up next, again following spring, England Wales precipitation of 85 to 125 millimetres. This one with low pressure more or less over top of the country. That's a wet autumn, quite a cold autumn as well, especially so in October of 1974. Once that autumn is out of the way though, we go into an exceptionally dry spell that lasts for 2 years. Quite a long gap to 1990, so here's 1990 showing up again. We saw it in the first analogues package in the first part of the video. Here it is again. So this autumn again, following a spring, England Wales precipitation of 85 to 125 millimetres. We talked about this one has above average heights overall out to the northwest, below average heights to our east and south. A rather cooler November, otherwise a relatively mild autumn. 1997 has showed up again, so we have this one also in the first part of the video. This is a dry and warm autumn for September, October anyway, although it does get quite cold actually in the last week of October. There's some very significant frost in the last week of October 1997, but overall a couple of mild months, September, October, and they're also very dry and then very wet for November 1997. 2011 was in the last analogues package 2. This one with low pressure out to our west, high pressure is to our east, winds are up from a southeasterly direction. And so that's one of the warmest autumns on record. Not the warmest, but it's one of the warmest autumns on record. And that's for last year. So let's put all of that together, and this is how all Septembers combined are looking, following a spring with an England and Wales precipitation of 85 to 125 millimetres. And rather an unsettled signal actually for the Septembers, with low pressure to our north, high pressure out in the middle of the Atlantic, winds are in from a westerly direction. So quite an unsettled signal for September. All Octobers combined look quite wet and also potentially pretty cold, with low pressure to the east, high pressure out to the west, winds probably in from a northerly direction. So those Octobers could be pretty wet, but they could be quite cool at times as well. And it looks like quite a wet signal for November as well. You notice by November, the blocking signals begin to increase a little bit in the northern latitudes. Lots of low pressure to our south. Again, it looks like these autumns are significantly wetter compared to the first package of analogues, looking at the CET data. In fact, let's combine all autumns, and this is how we're looking. All autumns combined, following a spring England and Wales precipitation of 85 to 125 millimetres, and we look like this. It's an unsettled signal overall, with low pressure across much of northern Europe, so a wet autumn is favoured here. Remember, the CET data is favouring a dry autumn, the precipitation data though favouring a wet autumn. Now, we did have a lot of years within this analogues package from the 1800s. So let's exclude all years before 1950. And this is how all Septembers combined are looking, following springs with an England and Wales precipitation of 85 to 125 millimetres post 1950. And we see that with this, again, it's unsettled. Low pressure is to our north, over into the north of the country. Winds are in from the west, so it looks relatively unsettled. We go through to all Octobers combined. That's how we look. Low pressure is to our east, high pressure out to west. Winds are in from a north to northeasterly direction. So it's a drier signal for all Octobers combined, and probably relatively probably relatively settled, but could be a bit on the cool side. And then all Novembers combined look like that. High pressure up towards Scandinavia, low pressure is out to our west. Winds are in from an easterly direction. So potentially a little bit colder for Novembers. Actually, post 1950, you could envisage we're bringing in more of an easterly type influence there, if anything. Still cyclonic though. And overall, this is how all autumns combined are looking. Following a spring England Wales precipitation range of 85 to 125 millimeters, and it does look pretty anticyclonic. High pressure to the north of the country, low pressure is to southeast. So a more anticyclonic signal for these autumns when we exclude all years before 1915. But yeah, quite interesting. Quite an interesting batch of analogues for us there. Okay, so that's it. And I think the main takeaway from this is that if we look at the CT data, it very strongly favours a dry autumn. Precipitation data is more interesting because overall, for all years, it looks like we're favouring a wet autumn. But if we exclude the years before 1950, then we do favour a wet September, and then the autumn probably gets drier. And of course, with that high pressure signal, let's just go back to that actually. So this high pressure signal up to our north for these all autumns combined, I mean, there is a bit of cold potential in there as well, actually. So quite an interesting update. Hope you found it interesting and informative. Please give us a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments what you think, and don't forget to subscribe to Gaz Weather's YouTube channel. This video will be placed on the autumn 2020 updates page with a written summary going over everything that we discussed in the video, and I'm going to get that up for you later on. I've got a live stream at 5, so it'll probably be around 8, 9 o'clock, something like that. But I want to get it on the autumn updates page before the evening is out. And of course, we've got Gaz Weather's Sunny Roundup coming up very shortly, sort of early afternoon. ECMDF Metro France and DWD long range update will be released around the middle of the afternoon, and then we're going to live stream from 6 and from 5 o'clock, I should say. Yeah, that's going to be a pretty interesting live stream. We're looking at Beijing Climate Centre for winter of 2021. That's going to be from 5 o'clock this afternoon, but plenty more to come before then. I'll see you live from 5. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.